Good evening, everyone. System Chalk here with the 13th episode of Book of Hours. This is our first YouTube run on the game, although certainly I'm no stranger to it. And I will confess, as we sort of covered last week, I am juggling a few different save files. I've certainly learned a lot more about the game in the Twitch stream, particularly over the last couple of days where we wound up getting a few very special books. So there were a couple of suspicions that I had which were largely confirmed. And of course that's going to wind up feeding into the series here, but essentially I want to treat this like it's its own thing. And another fun challenge that I run into is I have been trying to organize the library a little bit differently from how I do it in the Twitch stream, as well as the fact that on the Twitch stream I maintain a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet actually was started in the beta, so there are almost certainly some entries which have changed or otherwise have adjustments to be made. But one fun little challenge about this is trying to remember sort of all of the different results. So for instance, I can remember traveling at night. I believe this is the one that gives, Volume 1 gives the impulse, and so my suspicion here would be the true and complete accounting of the Asclepian mysteries and the roots of the house would give us impulse. 108, I believe, gives us a confounding parable, but I've already forgotten what the Seven Faces of Icarus, What Does Not Bark, Stolen Reflections, and the Orchid Transfigurations give. Although if I remember correctly, I think this one I decided to put an intuition on because they were roughly the same. So it creates a fun little challenge in terms of figuring out what to do with my different books. I happen to like little challenges like that, although there are going to be some implications for the playthrough because I'm certainly not as wealthy as I am in my other run. So we do have a bronze spintra, but it is a four tally text. So in this case, we won't be able to purchase the calcite supplications. I do notice that we're hiring Mrs. Kill, and we have a Gale. So I'm going to make a guess here that we want to try and do something with Heart. And again, it's one of these cases where I'm sure I summarized what I wanted to do with the day at the end of the series, but it has been about a week since I've recorded it, so I'm going to take a minute here to figure out what's going on, and then the remaining episodes for the week should be recorded a little bit closer, and so we're more likely to make the sort of progress that we want. So, Ravage Foundry needs scale and forge. The wrecked pantry has quite a high heart requirement, although we do have the core, so essentially we can add 5 plus the cake bowls to get up to 7. So I suspect we're trying to open up the reading room, which would make sense because it has a fair number of texts available to us. In terms of any other heart activities, we do have the Grand Ascent, so we can try and boost Mrs. Kill. In fact, I seem to recall maybe one of the plans was to boost Mrs. Kill. She's kind of a default value that I have for this. Seeing as I don't have the Whist, I would take her base value of 2, I'd use the core on that, and the cake bowls. Of course, we wouldn't, or mixing bowls, we wouldn't do that this time because we need the core for the Gale. And then for the 3rd floor, we can't do that trick. We would need to get Mr. Kill, but that's really a question of getting the Whist when the time comes. So I think I have a fair idea in terms of what I want to try and do. It's so interesting to see these bare shelves. I've got a very full house in the other playthrough. So what else are we looking at? I've used up some of the Roscragen whiskey. And I should probably take a minute here to see what books I've got available. Okay, so we've got Deoris Volume 1, Perugian Diaries, The Devoured Tantra, Traveling at Night Volume 3, Lady Ava's Repose, Journal of Walter de Wolf. Okay. Deaths and Their Evasions is in a language I don't understand, so I was wondering if maybe this was where I put my too difficult... I think I remember how I did this now. So these were more difficult to understand. These were languages or recordings that I couldn't understand, but then these are also in languages I don't understand. So why did I separate them so? I won't dwell on that too much. Really, at this point, we want to focus on the things that we can read anyway. And then I have some stragglers over here. I'm assuming it's just because I ran out of space over here. So I think our work's cut out for us. I think getting Mrs. Kill to work on the reading room is the first priority. Now, if I'm going to be getting additional books, I definitely want to catalog these reasonably quickly as well. But we're not really going to be able to make any progress if we don't, if we don't get some extra skills. So I am going to take a minute here just to see what I can realistically expect. I suspect I don't have any nectar skills, given that I haven't been gardening. So Deoris is off the list. Perugian Diaries, we do have a Faust, so we can bring one to that, as well as one from the Barren Silence's Astrolabe. Now, obviously here we can't rely on the Gale. However, I do have Furs and Feathers, so we know the Perugian Diaries is available to us. The Devoured Tantra, I suspect, is... yeah, that's a pretty straightforward one for us. In fact, I believe we wouldn't even need Arab for that. Okay, so this tells me that we can actually read Deoris, and so by implication... so if this was a question of an impulse, impulse gives me 1 nectar. The cake bowls give me 1 nectar. Okay, that's interesting. So I seem to be under the belief... I don't think there's something that gives a 2 nectar memory unless it's wrapped in the king. So somewhere I seem to have gotten the belief that I could read Deoris Volume 1. But yeah, the Perugian Diaries, Devoured Tantra are definitely things that I can read. We don't have Shapt, so for Traveling at Night Volume 3... I'm assuming we're either waiting for the relevant weather or an appropriate memory. Lady Ava's Repose, I think, lives in a similar place. We don't even seem to have any winter under our skills. And then the Journal of Walter de Wolf, I think, is in a similar case. So, let's say we've got Perugian Diaries. We throw our Faust and Furs and Feathers at that. The Devoured Tantra, like I said, I don't even need to really worry about the Arab, so we would be able to bring Mrs. Kill back in if we felt there was a use for it. But I think probably what I will do, I'm going to start thinking about what kind of collecting I can do. And then I'll also catalog things one at a time. So, the other thing I wanted to check with Mrs. Kill was... So I'm really worked up about... Okay, no, actually I think I know how I'm going to handle this. I'll talk with Mrs. Kill a few times over to see what kind of memories I can get out of her. But let's start this off with the diaries. So, the Perugian Diaries. In 1907, at the age of 18, Christopher Olopoli left Strathcoyne's household to study theology at the University of Perugia in Italy, enrolling under the name Christopher Strathcoyne. So, we add Furs and Feathers to seal the deal. I can master this mystery, enough sky to match mystery sky. We will also read the Devoured Tantra right away. So here we add Desires and Dissolutions. Now we do still need to add an element of the soul. But it's really our choice as to what one we want to add. I do think I still have some use for health, but out of these... Fet doesn't have... Oh, right. It does matter which of these skills I apply, so... Grail Birth, I can master this mystery, enough Grail to match Mystery Grail. Now I do want to assign some... I do want to catalog some books, but I'd like to do this one at a time. So I'm curious if I have a desk that will actually allow me to use the Fet. Yes, because it has moth, I can do that. So we'll catalog this book. This book was probably written around the time of Hush House's nocturnal period, after the turn of the century. If I examine it, I can learn more about what knowledge it might contain. Books from this period are almost never contaminated. We'll still read it one at a time, but now we're ready to bring Mrs. Kill in and get her to work. Now, we're not going to start with the Gale or anything like that. Actually, sorry, we'll start her with the Gale, but we are going to talk with her for the majority of the day rather than unlock the room. So, just to reiterate, she's got 1 heart. We add the Gale, which brings her up to 4. Oh, that's not the right room. Oh, did I get this wrong with the dimly lit chamber? Shame on me. Well, that's a bummer. I seem to have misjudged how I was going to use the day. Well, let's see what we can do to recover this then. So, my options on the stairs, or my options in the house, so 4 heart. Now that would just be the midwife's assistance with a Gale, but that's really wasting the Gale for the day. So the brass ring here would be 7 heart. So we bring Mrs. Kill from 1 to 3 with the core. 3 to 6. Okay, no, we were going for the rec pantry after all. Talk about the weather, more useful than one might expect, especially in Britain. One dilemma by reading both text at the same time is I need to try and figure out which series I want to run with. So I usually just stay quiet and wait for the finished version. I'm gonna add this to this room here because we can read the Tantra of Worms. It's written in Sanskrit, but I suspect it's going to be a while before we have enough scale to tackle that. We have the 1 from the health. We get 1 from the hourglass, but if it's just pentiments and precursors we're applying to it, then we can go up to 4 without assistance. Let's take advantage of the weather while it lasts. So we will talk with her with my element of the soul now. Everything goes easier with a song. I just want to see what I'm working with before I commit the Arab to catalog another book. Alright, so the Devourer Tantra. The diplomat priest Stanislav John Schaller transcribed this from the library of a Red Long, but his manuscript remains in a private collection in Karasham. The Devourer Tantra warns of the uses and dangers of appetite, but devotes an entire passage to the star-limbed hunger-bringers who it describes with obvious affection. My assistant and I are both a little merrier. So finally we will talk with Mrs. Kill about the kitchen bowls. Cake time! I can lend my assistant something to help increasing their abilities. And in 30 seconds we will read the rest of the Devourer Tantra as well as the other text. So again, 2 elements of the soul, assuming I don't want to renew anything else. But I'm not in too much of a rush to do that, seeing as we'll have a number of memories to work with. I feel reasonably comfortable reading multiple books here. There's always the worry of Enuma, but we have the number of skills that we have is quite a bit lower than what we would normally be working with. So as a consequence, we don't have as much to worry about in terms of just basically when it comes down to, you know, am I gonna find myself in a situation where I need to take multiple days to level up a skill? That's a lot less likely than one where, you know, on the Twitch broadcast I've got 1 up to 9. We've got, I think, 1 at 8. then there's a bunch of 6s and 7s, and given that I haven't committed anything but 1 to that tree of wisdoms, I have the added problem of not having many actions in a given day. So, alright. This skill is somber as autumn, as kind as autumn. She also likes her beer. So we're going to be talking with her, because if I wind up with a storm or a solace from conversation with her, that's going to mean that I can use her again to move up the Grand Ascent. Whereas if I don't get that from her, I can still use the Arab to do some additional work. So I can, you know, I can catalog a book, I can open up the bag of tricks. I could also, well, with Arab I wouldn't be able to investigate. Oh yeah, that's right, I haven't gotten Crowcross Sands yet, so that's another thing I want to work on. But we can investigate the moor with health. So as it turns out, it was the right call to use that tryst after all. A million blazing fires in the belly engulf what has been allowed by the multiform mouths. So another confounding parable. We have the Applebright Euphonies. So Grail and Sky Grail and Sky Lesson. And of course I always have the worry that I'm corrupting my library here, but it's part of the fun. I tend to find the games are a little fun when you allow some imperfections to come in, or some little challenges for you. So, you know, in this case here, I think there's something, for those of you that are kind of on the fence about this game, I suspect at this point people have decided whether or not they want to pick up the game based on this playthrough. But one thing I've rather liked about the experience of maintaining that spreadsheet between betas and then translating that into the Steam broadcast, or well, there was a Steam broadcast, but the Twitch stream. It's kind of it's almost like me, the player, really becoming the librarian, right? Because so much of this task that the librarian is set in the game is to organize the knowledge in a particular way, and there is something fun about the way that they've set up the books. I'm sure it's also just more interesting, but because you have these divisions in terms of the mysteries that they contain, the memories that they provide you, the series that they belong to, and just simply the information that's revealed inside of the books, there are multiple equally viable, let's say, division scheme, like so where you would want to put them for easy reference without having to consult a spreadsheet, let's say. And they all have their merits on their own, but on top of that there's limited shelf space. So I found that with the reading room I wanted to try and be a little more organized than I actually was, and then I would run into the challenge where I couldn't quite fit everything in the spots where I wanted them. So that's going to be a challenge which lasts a little bit longer for this series, because I have the double challenges. One of not having the immediate recall, so if I stream a game, first of all I play it for longer, but on top of that I'm going to play it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, whereas if I'm recording videos for YouTube, that's going to be for a couple of hours over a weekend. And it's a little bit, I'm sure some of you may remember from school, there's those classes you didn't quite put the effort in. And, you know, if you just crack open your textbook every time you go to lecture, or maybe the day before lecture, the knowledge doesn't quite stick the same way that it does if you study every day. So, all right, so let's read Christopher Alopoly's diary, his college diary or whatever. For 4 years since his adoption from a Bristol orphanage, Alopoly served as Strathcoyne's pupil and protege, but his relationship with this austere and secretive man was always complicated. His journal confides, "I still think Fraser's intentions are good, certainly he agrees, but I never understood the final goal of his investigations. He was never prepared to enlighten me, and good intentions or not, I can no longer bear this dream of eyes. We've agreed to part, almost amicably." Alopoly left Perugia in 1909 without completing his degree. He had long lost interest in his studies, and the latter half of the journal is concerned with his studies of Umbrian folk songs and notes towards his own compositions, which are of widely varying quality. Oh, this one's probably going to give us a beguiling melody. One of the better ones, In the Marshes of Night, suggests he visited the old Lake Fucinus near Ortuccio. Oh, cheerful ditty. And strings and songs. Okay. So this doesn't follow the neat scheme that I've got for this room here. I wonder if I can... if there's a logical place for music books. This does have a piano in it, but it doesn't have a natural shelf. What I think I am going to do, though, so Cheerful Ditty is a heart. Oh, that's great, actually. So this does mean I'm going to hire Mrs. Kill again. I'm a little reluctant to do this just because this seems like a good way to lose the book, but I will put the Perugian Diaries up on the shelf here just to use the piano as a bit of a reminder. Okay. I'm happy with both of these outcomes. They're easy to add. Acquire strings and songs. Use this lesson to acquire a new skill. It may also be useful to think about what I get with a confounding parable or a cheerful ditty. So with the cheerful ditty, I can use that with Mrs. Kill to boost up her heart. And then that's going to be a way to, at minimum, get the next floor. Although, you know, perhaps I would want to use the dimly lit chamber as well. There it is, and can be no tizzer. Mrs. Kill, as every local gossip knows, came from France to marry Mr. Kill, but there's scant trace of the continent in her accent now. This does give me some winter as well as forge, so as always it does bear at least a bit of examination. Just the reason I say this is that we do have things like winter text, and we did say that the forge text would be a challenge. So in this case, you know, the winter is more likely here. So if I've got 2 winter coming from regret, if let's say I had a winter instrument or I had, you know, some other indicator that I would be able to work with it, even an ink would work in this case. That would maybe be a time where I want to use one of these elements of the soul because I've gained a memory that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to use. But in this case here, I think it's fairly clear that this isn't gonna move the needle for us. I think at this point here, as nice as it is to keep Mrs. Kill talking, it probably wouldn't hurt to just use her in the pantry and then use the Arab to provide her the cheerful ditty and move up to the... I guess it would have to be the cheerful ditty and the health, so that's the rest of my elements of the soul spoken for, so we won't be cataloging the book. But that's fine because we have plenty that we can do for the rest of the day. I think under texts, I suppose in a pinch I can try and get a better understanding of day, where I thought I was going to go with Day Oris. Yeah, and then we'll see what the weather brings. Alright, smashed glass and shattered timber. This room can be restored, and there'll be salvageable provisions tucked away in the wreckage, but I'll need someone with strong arms and a patient heart. Another leaf on the Tree of Wisdom. Strings and songs, the harmonies of the lower skies are here reproduced. The Applebright Euphonies. Use this lesson to acquire a new skill. Now I get the option of hiring Mrs. Kill right away here, so we'll take it. Mrs. Kill's mood always improves when I drop by. Mrs. Kill stands ready to help. You always cheer me up, she says morosely. I definitely want to take a look at what I can commit here, so I do want to go to the Tree of Wisdoms at some point, but I'm going to wait until... Basically, I'll wait until we've got the... Until we have both skills. And I know we probably already did a bit of an audit in terms of some of the other ones here. I got an annoying comment, so please keep those to yourself, about how I'm playing it wrong by not wanting to engage with the hours from nowhere. All I can say is it's my playthrough, and if you don't like the writing, I suspect there might be better games. At least for your tastes. But we still do want to try and get the elements of the soul that are relevant to the needs that I have. I'm not trying to do the same thing that I've done on the Twitch broadcast, which would essentially be to avoid committing things until absolutely necessary, which is very educational in its own right, but I suspect that that would be a little much to take for a YouTube series. So we will commit the cheerful ditty. I can discuss a memory with my assistant. So that brings us up to 3, and then the health will move it up to 4. Oriflams, thanks you for your continued interest. Another leaf on the Tree of Wisdom, so we'll take a minute with the... Actually, we can use the Tree of Wisdoms now. Okay, so first of all, the new arrivals. So there was the recommendation here. Not that we have to follow the recommendations from the game, but it does say we would maybe want to start with Bosk. So if we do that with the Applebright Euphonies, we would get another Arab. What may be known? Calyptra is the law that requires secret knowledge to be concealed, except in the libraries of the Watchman's Tree. The number of the hours of Calyptra is 3, and we do not speak of the oldest hour. This observance is a matter of Bosk. And the other alternative is Illumination, which we've already committed the Watchman's Paradoxes for. So if we wanted to know what the text was there, we would have to bring this up to level 2. Now the big thing is right now I don't feel the need to get a 3rd Arab, so I'm going to avoid committing that now just because there may be another path that we want to go down. But as for strings and songs, we have Birdsong and Dictodromy, so... Oh, we've already committed to Nyctodromy, so strings and songs would get us a 2nd core. Again, doesn't necessarily get me what I'm looking for. I may change my mind on some of these if we get the workbenches that allow me to start leveling up elements of the soul, but in this case I'm still preserving an option. So, the round. There are no words in the songs, in the Song of Birds, so Birdsong has no beginning and will have no end. It's nothing directly relevant to my interests here, but that's fine. Again, if we start reading a couple of other books along these lines, we will potentially either have an upgrade that we can work with, or we have the option to double things up and improve them. So I'm not. I should have maybe been a little more. Well, first of all, I think I changed my mind a little bit, but I should have been a little more precise once I knew kind of how I changed my mind. I like the idea of being eager to bring in elements of the soul in terms of new ones, but I personally haven't really felt the need to just commit everything for getting any old element of the soul. I know it allows me to do more during a day, but in the end, I'm happy to have sort of the restriction that I'm working with now in order to preserve the option later on. In addition to the fact that, again, there are some things that I'm just simply uncomfortable with as from the perspective of the artist, and so as a result, I would want to, avoid taking those choices. Memories don't last long outside books, but it's made the difference for the day. I'm ready to lend my limbs. All right. So I like this room. The pantry. This room is close to the roots of the house, and so it had a troubled reputation with the servantry, who, late at night, might hear the pulse of an unseen drum, the buzzing of flies, voices crying out in tongues unknown, and so the servants would trade favors, not to be the one to fetch spices for his lordship's posset after dark. So lots of different things to pick up. We've got the box of oddities. I also noticed with the update they've changed the sound a little bit. So I noticed that Mr. and Mrs. Kill's house, I don't really hear the baby anymore. I guess it's maybe a rattle? Or there's just simply no Mrs. Kill part at all. But when it comes to the birds, the combination of the birds and the bells are a little more subtle than they were before. I'm kind of curious what drove those decisions, but... Alright, we'll work alongside each other. I should probably make a choice. I've already used the elements of the soul, so I don't see any reason to try and get more memories. So yeah, I think we'll just work with the Grand Descent again. The windows are tightly closed, the carpet surprisingly clean, but my skin prickles at the watchful presence in the stairwell. We will need to placate it before we go higher. So lots of goodies. One small drawback about keeping some of the items in reserve, or some of the elements of the soul in reserve, is that I don't get to kind of consider every single item like I would in other circumstances. Now that's fine, because considering, I think if I considered the ham, I would probably just reduce that down to animal bones anyway. But, you know, there's trade-offs, and in this case here, I'm happy to consider as required, but it does involve a little bit of sacrifice. So I will just double check something here. So for seasoning, it needs leaves, beverages, fuel, flour, and for ingredients, fuel, root, sustenance, and beverage. At no point do remains come in. So I think I'm going to move the essential peroist. Gideon soaks. Well, I guess Gideon soaks kind of count. Oh wait, no, because liquids don't work. Grand Descent first floor. By long tradition, each Baron Brandkrug had their image set in a niche in the Grand Descent. Later, the Curia of the Isle continued the tradition for their librarians. But I'm going to try and move things to slightly more appropriate areas. Cinnabar, similar story. I don't know if I'll put that bright scarlet powder with a silvery brilliance locked within. I suppose it's appropriate because we still have the serpentinite as well, but I figure we'll leave the pantry. When it comes down to it, we'll have everything that's quote-unquote edible in the pantry. I'll leave it to you to decide whether the pickled pilchards or the pickled mushrooms count as edible properly. Alright, rose pearl and phosphorescent scrapings are also good. Oh, a storm. Okay. So that's going to be one that I want to consider. Now, rose pearl I feel like I've seen in a kind of an alchemist's area, so I think we'll put that among the other ingredients. In fact, we'll do that as well. Sometimes the organization is the fun. And it did just occur to me that we are actually at time, so I will wrap up the organization, and then we will hit tomorrow. This is a hard one to keep on the shelf, but alright, there we go. There's a little more logic behind that. If I was really obsessive about it, I would completely organize all of the items on the shelves, but I'm okay letting a little madness slip through. So, in terms of the overall plans for Tuesday's episode, just again a reminder that on Tuesdays it's kind of a day off for the VOD, or the VODs on. Well, even then it's VOD. I'll upload the stream stuff, but the pre-recorded videos that are specifically for YouTube, that's a day off for me. But when we're back on Wednesday, I'm going to take some time just reevaluating what texts I have. What I think I might do is move items out of this room and put them on the shelf, so I can have the lowest one of each of the different texts available to me. That'll make it a little bit easier to keep track of things. And at some point, I think I have something of a memory for what most of these texts do, but I should probably figure out a better way of just locking in, you know, particularly Stolen Reflections, What Does Not Bark, and the Seven Faces of Icarus. It would be nice not to have to give up an element of the soul to be able to figure those out. We may be able to get away with the Maze Crazed Room. We were able to get 7 with Mrs. Kill into the pantry, so the fact that we have a storm following probably means that we can go further. I don't seem to remember there being anything too major there, but if today just winds up being something, or well, the next episode, but if today in terms of the game time winds up being one where we wind up reacquainting ourselves with certain texts and just getting some of the cataloging and all of that done, that's completely fine. It's winter, we know what we have available to us, and we can move at our own pace. It's not that we have like a Numa or anything like that impending. So all of that will be dealt with on Tuesday. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.